This episode of Navel Gazing is sponsored by valleygivesback.org. Adding a Valley charity to your estate plan creates a lasting legacy that tells future generations what causes matter to you. Your action will inspire others to follow your lead and make a difference. With a planned gift, you have the power to impact the Valley community forever without affecting your current lifestyle. Learn more at valleygivesback.org, an initiative of the Valley Community Foundation. Plan now, give later, and impact tomorrow at valleygivesback.org.
For hundreds of years we brought you the news. Printed the info, we gave you the clues. Owners' profits were always sky high. Changing market now threatens our lives. Post-literation, critical reading.
Curses more than me.
He's a sailor, though. He curses like a sailor.
Okay. Hello, welcome to Navel Gazing, the Valley Indies weekly talk show. We're sponsored by valleygivesback.org, and the music you just heard is from The Bad Slugs. You could find out more by visiting thebadslugs.bandcamp.com.
Quick show of hands. Well, no, show of voices. Did anybody here go to Bandcamp other than me?
No, I don't
There you go.
know.
I got that over.
Say I did.
Original American Pie reference.
I am
of
going to
some
hold
sort.
that. I'm talking 1989, before that garbage.
I wasn't even
All right.
born then.
I'm sorry.
Very cultured.
This week, you just heard voices from the leaders of two groups that have formed recently, the Valley Young Republicans and the Naugatuck Valley Young Democrats. From the Democrats, we have Stephan Behuniak, a Seymour resident and selectman. And from the Republicans, we have David Papcin, an Ansonia resident who serves on the city's tax board. Gentlemen, welcome.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Let's have some good discussions.
Thank you. Happy to be back.
Okay. David, let's begin first with you because the Valley Young Republicans formed recently. The group's first meeting, I believe, was February 26th in Derby City Hall. How did this group come about? Why did you decide to found the Valley Young Republicans?
Yeah, so essentially after the 2017 election, we looked at what opportunities and what areas can we grow in terms of the Republican voter base and Republican volunteer base. And I'm thinking, well, there's a ton of people out there, a ton of young Republicans that really haven't gotten involved. And so what I wanted to do with the Valley Young Republicans is provide a space for them to get involved. On election night, we had a ton of young people come in and say, we're in the area. Let's make... Yep.
I don't mean to interrupt, I'm Eugene, but you're talking like the election, the local municipal
Yes.
mayoral
Yep, the 2017
election
mayoral
Ansonia.
election. Yep, the Cassetti
Gotcha.
election. Yep.
Gotcha.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
So we found that there was a lot of young people that wanted to get involved, and I'm thinking, there's no real space for them to get involved at this time. So that was kind of just how it came about. I got in touch with a lot of other young Republicans in the area, Anna Andretta, who works at City Hall, Domenico Filippone, who was elected third ward alderman that night, Cassie DeFalla and Mike Shea, who helped with Rich Zekin's 2017 mayoral election out in Derby. And we just kind of came together and set the goal for what do we want this organization to be, and how can we just bring people on board to help us, achieve Republican victories and fight for conservative causes.
And how can people interested in that, if they're listening to this, become involved with your group?
The best way to get involved is just to reach out with us. We won't bite. We do have a Facebook page. It's the Valley Young Republicans Facebook page. You can't miss it. We also have a Twitter. I believe it's at Valley Young GOP. Just feel free to reach out to us. Anybody that wants to help get involved, work their way up the political food chain, or even just get community service hours. If you're in high school, I know that was an issue for me. We welcome you with open arms, and we'll have a lot of opportunities for you to actually get involved.
Okay, and shifting to Stephan, it's interesting to hear David say that it was in the aftermath of the election here in 2017, because I think your group, the Naugatuck Valley Young Democrats, you guys were formed in the immediate wake of the 2016 election. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And how did the group sort of coalesce, I guess?
So we came about shortly after the 2016 election. our first meeting was last February. So it was a group of young Democrats who, frankly, almost none of us had any sort of political experience whatsoever. Not even, a lot of us hadn't even volunteered on any sort of campaign. It was just the people who were kind of disgusted and upset with the way the election had gone, and I think surprised as well. And
that's obviously the national,
the national, correct, the 2016. I mean, also there were some surprises more locally, but mainly these were people focused on the national politics. A lot of Bernie Sanders supporters, I think, not just with our group, but across the country, have kind of risen up in other groups. So we got together and had a big first meeting. I think there was about 30 people at our first one, and then we laid it out. Some of the people who had some experience said, "Hey, here's what it takes to get involved." We had people from Connecticut Young Democrats there to talk. Kara Rochelle, who has been an organizer for a long time and very involved in activism, she spoke and said what it's going to take to kind of get people on board, and we just did it. And people who actually found themselves wanting to stay a part of it did, and we kept about 80% of the people who came to that first meeting have since come to twice monthly meetings basically, and we've gotten people on boards and commissions throughout the valley. Last night we had 2 more young Democrats become chairs of DTCs, Tarek Raslin in Ansonia and Yellow Malurba in Derby, both members of our organization. So,
and do you explain what a DTC is?
A Democratic Town Committee. There's Republican Town Committees as well. They are the bodies that are elected to represent their party at a town level. So I'm the chairman of the Seymour Democratic Town Committee, for example. I'm not sure, David, are you the chair of the Republicans yet?
I'm actually running for the Ansonia Republican Town Committee chairmanship, and our election is tomorrow.
So
no kidding.
Yeah.
Another youngster soon to be in the ranks. But they have a lot of ability to influence local party politics. They have a lot of ability to lend their voice to statewide issues. So it's an important thing to have young people in those positions.
Like the Young Democrats sort of, and this is filtered through various people, sort of took over the Democratic Town Committee in Derby. Is that sort of accurate, or it was a surprise to a lot of? I've got a couple of emails the next day being like, "Hey, did you see what Anita Delgado did?"
Sure. First of all, I can get in trouble for how I answer this, I think, but
All
because
right.
the question
the
I did use the
Derby
word takeover.
Right, right, because you phrased it in a very
well, and then
loaded way.
I've seen like stories from throughout the state about expressing a sort of similar trend of turnovers on town committees.
And the background of Derby is that there was a Democratic primary. The Democratic Party was split between sort of what was described as an old guard, new guard type thing. So that's the whole backstory. That's why I'm asking.
So we don't have the numbers to take anything over without the support of the old guard, so to speak. Even in Derby, I think there's 7 or 8 young Democrats on their town committee of 36. In Seymour, we have 10 out of 38 right now. So we have huge numbers, relatively speaking, to other towns, but we don't have enough to be a majority to throw the bums out, so to speak. So what I think happened in Derby is the vast majority of people on the Democratic Town Committee saw who was doing the hard work, who was getting results, who was, the future, and the people who were the hungriest, and those people rose to prominent positions. And I think it's as simple as that.
And then David, and I don't mean to interrupt you either.
Well, I was going to say, you're running for RTC chair in Ansonia, you mentioned. Is it like a contested election? And just off the top, like you mentioned, the 2017 election, Cassetti won in a landslide.
Mm-hmm.
The Board of Aldermen is all Republican. Seems like the RTC is doing a good job, isn't it? Like what made you decide to run for that position?
I would say it's just, the amount of energy that we need to bring to the table, especially for the chairman's race. It is a contested race. I will be going up against the current chairman. And it's nothing
Irving
to
Reed?
Irving Reed,
Okay.
yep.
Okay.
I didn't know who that was.
Yep.
Okay.
And it's nothing to knock him. He's done a good job in the past, but I think that there's a new level needed of energy and attitude for the Republicans, especially when we're seeing such success that we're having in Ansonia. We need someone who's going to be a vocal advocate and someone who's going to speak up on the issues and where they're necessary. And I just think I'm the candidate that would be able to do that in the best ability possible.
How do you navigate? How old are you, David?
I'm 19 years old.
You're 19 years old. Wow. God bless you.
Thank you.
How do you navigate being that young and entering this political arena where you have a lot of people who are veterans of the local political scene without stepping on toes? Because I'm 44 and I automatically don't like 19-year-olds. It's like, hey, come on, leave me alone. You're busting my chops. How do you sort of not come across as, not that you are, but an arrogant jerk who's just coming in here and try to, take over the party?
Yeah. Well,
Does that question make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
It's just a matter of you need to show. I don't like to make my age something that's like an issue in politics. I like to have my results be really my biggest credential, and I've always been the person that if you want me to do something, I will work hard to ensure that will happen. And I think I've proven myself to the other RTC members and other Republicans across the Ansonia that, I am capable. I am young, but I still am capable of getting things done. I have got things done this past election, and if elected, I will continue to get things done and continue to put Ansonia and the Valley in the forefront.
And when did you first get involved in politics?
So I was never really a political person, but my family has always been political. My good family friends out in Milford, one's a family friend. She's Kim Rose. She's the state representative up in Milford. So she's always been kind of like mentoring me in a sense. And then my aunt, Joanne Russo, who was a former Democratic, she served in some position out in Milford as well. But they were always telling me like, oh, what's going on at the time. But I never really took politics too seriously. It was just something that it was kind of like a dirty topic at the time. And it still is nowadays. But in 2014, I remember thinking, okay, who's going to run for president in 2016? We're all thinking, okay, it's going to be Hillary Clinton, obviously. But then I was looking on a list, and I saw that Donald Trump's name was on that list. I'm thinking, well, let me see what this guy's about. And a lot of what I heard from him was common sense. And I'm thinking, yeah, okay, maybe we need someone who can come in and actually deliver results. And so that kind of spurred me to get involved. Now, my actual entry into politics came in about March 2017. I approached the mayor at a town forum, and I said, I have an interest in politics and serving in government. Is there any way I can get involved in any capacity? And so we held, discussions. And later that month, he decided to appoint me to the Board of Apportionment and Taxation. That entire summer, I was out campaigning for him, knocking on doors, putting up lawn signs, and it's just something that I love, and I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to see that where I'm at today is completely different.
I'm sorry.
No worries.
It's interesting to hear like President Trump's name come up, and you were both inspired by him, but in completely different ways.
Yep.
I'll just leave that there. I don't even know where I was going with that. But how about in terms of these GOP meetings, what's the name of the group again? The
Valley Young Republicans.
Valley Young Republicans. Who's involved in it? As my computer goes nuts. How many people do you have involved? And actually, this is a good time to take a break and hear from our sponsor, valleygivesback.org. And when I come back, I'll finish my incoherent question. Hi, this is Eugene Driscoll, most likely interrupting myself to bring you a message from our sponsor, valleygivesback.org. Adding a Valley charity to your estate plan creates a lasting legacy that tells future generations what causes mattered to you. Your action will inspire others to follow your lead and make a difference. With a planned gift, you have the power to impact the Valley community forever without affecting your current lifestyle. Learn more at valleygivesback.org, an initiative of the Valley Community Foundation. Plan now, give later, impact tomorrow at valleygivesback.org. All right, thank you for your sponsorship, valleygivesback.org. And David, before I interrupted myself, I was trying to ask you what happens at your meetings, and also I'm interested in learning, the young Democrats seem to be this new group of people who came out who are not particularly coming from the already active Democrats. Is it the same with the young Republicans? Do you have people new to politics, or is it people who already embedded in the system who are helping you launch?
It's a mix of both. Typically on our executive board, we have people that are and have been pretty involved in politics just because we need to have people to mentor the others so that they can get their foot in the door. And then we have people that, have no prior experience whatsoever, just looking to see how they can get involved and how far they can go. In terms of what we do at our meetings, we've only had 2 meetings so far because we are relatively new. At our kickoff meeting, we pretty much just described what we want to do with the organization, which I outlined before. And at this past meeting that we had, Monday, we prepared a round of endorsements for different candidates across the valley and across the state. And we're looking forward to future events that we're planning on holding. And it's all based on our road to the convention, because the convention is coming up in May, the Republican convention, I should say that. Where they'll nominate the different statewide candidates. And so we're all pretty much just gearing up for that and the spectacle that's going to be.
Yeah, it's an exciting time to be involved in politics, at least in the state of Connecticut. What about, and Ethan was probably going to ask you this anyway, but in the past there's been sort of a divide of some kind within the Ansonia Republican Party, at least it plays out locally. I don't know. There was like a Cassetti camp and a Phil Tripp camp for a while. Is that an accurate description? That's how I interpret it from reading Ethan's stories. But
I would say we all just have our certain ideas of how Ansonia should be governed, and I think Mayor Cassetti has delivered in terms of what we're seeing in Ansonia. We're seeing unprecedented economic growth, booming infrastructure, and different things like that. So they can differ on how they think that Ansonia can be governed, but realistically what it comes down to is who's done it and who's done it successfully. And that's not to knock Phil Tripp in any way, but it's to say that what Mayor Cassetti's doing is working.
And have you sort of reached out to Phil Tripp to get his support of you? Is he somebody you need in your corner to successfully lead the party?
I'm happy to have any. I mean, I want to have a unified Republican Party and a unified Ansonia Republican Town Committee, because at the end of the day, we are all Republicans and we all should be fighting for the same Republican causes. I have reached out to him, and I'm looking forward to see if I will be getting his support tomorrow night.
Okay. All right, I'll shut up now, Ethan. I apologize.
Should we talk about some local or state issues, I guess?
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot. Now that we're talking.
Because we want to talk about some of the races, but
the statewide races. And then there's also local stuff. School regionalization seems to be a push, but I don't know if I believe everything I'm reading. There's... Well, I'm editorializing, but maybe, let's go.
Just the major political story this week in the state was the failure of Supreme Court Justice Andrew McDonald's confirmation to be the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. The vote Tuesday in the state Senate was 19-16, with all 18 GOP senators voting no. This just from the New York Times story on it. They said Justice McDonald, who had been easily confirmed when he was nominated as an associate justice in 2013, faced robust opposition mounted by Republicans angered over his role in a Supreme Court decision on the repeal of the death penalty and his relationship with the governor, Daniel P. Malloy, a Democrat. His supporters responded with a vigorous effort of their own, including using robocalls and television ads to urge residents to call on lawmakers to confirm his nomination. They also suggested that some of the opposition
we're going to get sued at this point.
Was motivated by Justice motivated by Justice McDonald's sexual orientation, since he would have become the first openly gay Chief Justice of a state Supreme Court. In the aftermath of the vote, the Connecticut Democratic Party tweeted that, quote, Mitch McConnell's obstructionist tactics have officially arrived in Connecticut, and that anyone who cannot draw the parallels between Senator Fasano, that's the GOP leader in the state Senate, the Connecticut GOP, and Mitch McConnell is not looking closely enough. This was a calculated effort to block a qualified judge with purely political motives. I guess, David, as a Republican, how would you respond to those comments by the state Democratic Party?
I would say the same thing that happened with the Supreme Court decision, or not decision, but nomination back during when Obama was president with, I forget the name of the judge that he was trying
Merrick
to put
Garland?
Merrick Garland, yeah. I think it just comes down to their philosophy on, in this case, the Connecticut Constitution and how it should be interpreted. I honestly haven't been following this McDonald situation too well, but from what I understand, it wasn't too much of a political decision, no matter how much it, is made out to be, and whether it's made out to be identity politics, which I know is something that they've tried to turn it into. But at the end of the day, I'm going to say if they're going to put up a person especially for Chief Justice, it should be someone that should faithfully execute the Connecticut Constitution.
So you had drew the comparison with the National Republicans' rejection of Merrick Garland. You saying, yeah, it's sort of similarly motivated, I guess?
Well, I don't think so. I would say it's just a similar situation in that there's a difference in philosophy on how this justice would govern. I personally disagreed with not having a hearing for Merrick Garland just because we knew that he probably wouldn't make it through the confirmation process anyway, so you may as well just have it. And again, that just comes down to their philosophy on how they should interpret the Constitution and how they should, execute that.
Stephan, what do you think? What was your reaction to the vote yesterday and the whole process?
Well, if we think about the way our Constitution is written and our country was founded, separation of powers is one of the core tenets of our democracy, which means that there should be a strong judicial presence that is above the influence of party politics. And what we've seen with Justice McDonald is it is a copy of what happened at the national level. The Republican leaders were emboldened by what I think was a huge mistake in the National Congress to not have a hearing for Merrick Garland. So they figured, hey, maybe we could make it work again here. They will consider Malloy to be a lame duck, so any nomination that he makes, they say, well, it's not really relevant. But at some point, how far does that go? Because if you're in your last term, but it's day one, are you still a lame duck? Because I think if we keep going on this path where it's hyper partisan, you're going to have people making that argument. What I don't think is the core issue here is Justice McDonald's sexuality. There may be a handful of people that have some sort of issue with that still, but I think we're past that. I think any person that Malloy had nominated off the bat, Republicans would have found some way to deny, and it's a problem because it falls to the governor to make these nominations. So whether you like the governor or not, you need to judge solely the individual's ability to fulfill the role. And I think without question, Justice McDonald was qualified. So I think it was a terrible mistake. And I think Republicans have been coming out and saying this is not an issue. People don't care about this. I think they'll find that they may be mistaken in that.
Do you think it'll be a factor in the November elections, this Justice McDonald fight?
I think it's gotten enough publicity where it will be a factor. It's not going to be a top 3 or 4 issue, but I think it will come up more than some people are saying.
Is this the type of issue that your two groups will bring up in a monthly meeting? Is this what because I'm completely ignorant as to what goes on in those meetings.
If you want to touch on that first, yeah.
It may be discussed. I don't know that we would take any action outside of, I don't know that we would take action. I think maybe we might write some sort of editorial or something supporting, in this example, supporting the pick. We're past that at this point now. If Malloy does in the next 5 days make another nomination and it's someone that we find to be qualified, perhaps we will take a position on that. Honestly, our role in this will probably be sharing things on Facebook or creating Facebook posts, and I think Dave will probably say the same thing.
Yeah, I actually would say similarly. I don't think it comes down to politics. I think it just comes down to how we think that the justice would govern if he was Chief Justice, or any nominee for that matter. If Malloy puts up another one, we'll assess him him or her in the same sense that we would did with Justice McDonald. So yeah, I don't think it's too much of an issue. I think going into this year's election is a pretty raucous election, just because of the state of Connecticut, and I think we're just going to focus on the issues that matter, that being taxes, the economy, infrastructure, different issues like that. I don't think this is going to be too big of an issue.
As the New York Times story mentioned, some of Senator Fasano's professed opposition to Justice McDonald's confirmation was based on his assent in the ruling that overturned the death penalty. Do you think we should just quickly? Do you think we should reinstate the death penalty in Connecticut? Or?
Well, I'm against the death penalty. I consider myself to be a very religious person. I don't believe that it's anybody's right to take away another person's life. And at the end of the day, that comes up to God if he was to take away another person's life. So I'm against the death penalty. So if that ever comes up in my future, I will still strongly stand against the death penalty.
What about, this is totally not what we're talking about, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You guys call yourselves young. What's the age limit? I'm 44. Can I join either of your groups or do I get booted?
Are you young-spirited?
No, I'm pretty much an old soul.
Well, then I think
I
know
live
the
on
answer there.
Rolaids and Bud Light Limeritas. No, all right. So, is there a particular age thing here?
We loosely define our organization as loosely under 35. If you're 36, 37, even in your case 44, if you're young-spirited, we're happy to have anybody on board.
Thanks for throwing the even in there, David. What about you, Stephan? It's all right.
So in my understanding of our two groups, the differences, we're a little more structured by a higher body. We follow the Connecticut Young Democrats and even more and also the Young Democrats of America guidelines. So our membership is strictly 14 to 36. At 36, you age out. Now, with that said, our group welcomes young-spirited folks. We're actually making a push to up the age to 40 because we think, especially in terms of how local government is run, for a long, long time before the last 2 years, every DTC and RTC that I've heard of, anybody under the age of 60 was considered young. And that's not a knock on people. That's just an absolute fact. Because if you're the 50-year-old guy, you might be the youngest person there for a long time. But yeah, we're very inclusive of people. For example, Chris Bowen, friend of the show, just over the age limit, but he's at our meetings. We absolutely value his opinion. He just
is there any way I can protest that he's a member of the group? Is there anybody? Is there? No, I'm just kidding.
Oh boy.
Sure, but I'll fight for him. He's a good guy. We take anyone's opinion. We invite Democrats of all ages to come.
What
and speak.
about? I'm sorry. Going to the other age of the age spectrum, you had mentioned 14. I mean, there's been a ton of news. I don't know if you guys have noticed lately of high school students getting politically active or socially active or in some ways active onto the streets, literally, to bring change. Are your two groups seeing an influx of young people joining the folds, and are you actively going into, well, I guess you wouldn't go into schools to recruit, but how do you get the high school kids involved? David, you want to go first?
Yeah, so we are actively recruiting high school students just because, like I mentioned before, community service hours are critically important to high schoolers' success, especially when they go to apply for college and other opportunities. And that's not to say they have to come just for community service hours. If they want to get involved for any reason, they're more than welcome to. I think it's great that we have a lot of young people getting involved, whether you're on either side of the political spectrum, as long as you're sharing your voice. I think that's really important to our democracy. And the Valley Young Republicans is just an outlet for them if they have a conservative or independent thinking mindset to come and do so.
Yeah, one of our next big initiatives is going to be recruiting, basically below the age of 22. So we're trying to make inroads right now with local colleges. That's something we've seen some success with, and we're also making efforts to work to getting. I know there's some political clubs in the high schools, and I actually know several high schoolers through different work in town. So we're working on that angle as well. The problem is, if you're in school, and then David could speak to this, it's harder to find the time to be involved in the town. If you live in Seymour, you work in the Valley, or you work in Sikorsky or something like that, you can make it back for meetings at night. If you go to school up at Yukon or Quinnipiac or wherever it is, it might be more difficult to make meetings. So that's something that we're balancing. But we do have kind of a pipeline of people who are right now in college who, is assuming they come back to the Valley, they'll be involved when they have time.
It's just interesting you mentioned about the DTCs being sort of dominated by the previous generation, I guess, because when Obama was elected, that was a major part of the narrative was the youth vote with Obama, but it didn't translate into long-term involvement in the nitty-gritty sort of local level politics, I guess.
And strangely enough, I don't think so. In my experience, the people who are on the DTC are people who have been there for a long time. I think 20, 30, 40 years ago, it was a different thing. It was more of a social club. It was a group within town of like-minded people that got together and they tackled issues. We used to have, DTC balls at one time, like big dance parties and things like that. So it was a social thing with the political aspect. Then I think it's tough. Even the educational process of what a DTC is difficult. A lot of people don't know. When I went to my first DTC meeting, I didn't know what it was. So Paul Roy, who had been a former first selectman in Seymour, he messaged me because we knew each other for a long time, and he said, "Hey, Stephan, do you want to join the town committee? We're looking for people to run for office." And I was like, "Yeah," and I had no idea what that was. I just said, "Yes, it sounds good." Showed up, was there, and I was blown away. I was like, I had no idea this kind of thing existed, and people still don't. It's difficult. So when I go door to door, when I go campaigning, sometimes it can be difficult telling people like what's going on, what exists. A lot of people don't know.
David, was it similar for you in terms of like you're running to take over the RTC, but was it just your prior, as you said, like you had family and members and friends being involved in politics? Is that how you got sort of drawn into it?
That's pretty much exactly how it went. Like, I honestly had no idea how to get politically involved if it wasn't for my family. And my aunt actually said to me, if you want to get involved, you have to go to your local town committee. That's the go-to way to do it. And that's exactly what I did. And that's where I gained the experience, the knowledge, the background. And that's what I'm, trying to offer with this chairman's race.
It's funny. Every once in a while, you'll hear somebody who says, yeah, I could run for first selectman, or I could run for mayor. And then you ask them, okay, what's the first step? And they say, I'm just going to say I'm running, and then I'll put it on Facebook. I'm like, okay, who are you talking to? What local party leaders are you speaking to? Oh, I don't know any of them. And I said, well, you're going to have a really difficult time if you don't get familiar with the people on your party's town committee, because those are the people who, honestly, they can shape the race. If you have the support of the town committee, even though people might not know what it is, you are way ahead of the game.
Especially like first timers and newcomers. Like,
Absolutely.
If you come into the scene and you're just trying to say, like, you show up at your first RTC or DTC meeting and you say, hey, I want to run for this, they're going to look at you and they're going to say, okay, well, what can you offer? So we've never even seen you here before. So you kind of have to make a name for yourself first.
That's interesting. Yeah. It's an interesting conversation, at least to me, because, we're reporters, and for a long time, I remember like working in Danbury or working in Westchester County, New York, Mount Kisco, all these places. The Republican or Democratic town committees there were sort of shadowy figures who didn't necessarily want publicity because they were the power brokers behind the scenes.
No, and
I don't think that's the case in the Valley. It seems to be more open. I had never covered a nominating convention.
Yeah, same here.
Until
I would cover them, but
Valley.
they'd all go into a room and say, we're going to
right.
come out and announce the slate when we have one. And here, like, we see, like, we don't see all of, like, the, intra-party fighting and stuff, but you get a picture of some of it, which is more than
it's much more
other places
transparent
I've
here.
worked.
If I can say a couple words about this, one thing that is a little different about the Valley and a lot of small towns is that the DTC, at least in Seymour, is the one Democratic group. And I think the RTC in Seymour is also the one Democratic group, outside of course, the Valley Young Dems and Republicans. Other, in cities particularly, they'll have maybe a half a dozen different groups of people who share similar, philosophies and are like-minded. So they might be able to run a candidate or push a candidate forward with support of a faction of the party that isn't necessarily aligned with the DTC. In Seymour, it's like a vacuum cleaner. Any Democrat we know that wants to get involved, they have to come to the DTC. That's just how it goes. In a lot of these small towns, there's not the infrastructure.
There's just not enough people.
Yeah. That's pretty much just how it is for any small town, really.
So should we move on to the stated, the reason we actually conned these guys into coming in?
Oh, boy.
Well, like the local races?
Yeah.
Well, in Ansonia and Derby, longtime state rep Linda Gentile is retiring, or she's not seeking re-election at the end of her current term this year. Two candidates have emerged on the Republican side, Ansonia Alderman Joseph Yauman And on the Democratic side, a member of the Derby Ethics Board, is that, or is she still prior member? And the founder of the Young Democrats, the Valley Young Democrats, Cara Rochelle. And I guess there are formal party nomination processes that will have to take. Like, these aren't the only.
It's a convention similar to the state convention, just at a smaller level.
It seems like these are the two sort of candidates that the parties are lining up behind. I think it's fair to say. That's not to say that others might emerge between now and then.
You never know.
And I would just put in a little plug for the Valley Indy. If you are running for office, let us know, because we're like the last to know. So please keep us in the loop.
Yeah, we're like searching, eCris, the SEC for like who's running.
Right. Yeah. Part of this podcast is going to be asking you guys who's running against
other races.
We're ignoramuses.
I guess how do you obviously, Stephan, you've worked with Cara at the Young Dems. How do you see the race shaping up? How would you sort of handicap it now?
It's tough to say. A race like this, it'll be a good test to see kind of where we're at, and it'll be a good test for the candidates themselves to differentiate themselves, because Linda Gentile has basically owned this district. She's had votes as high as 75-80% support with the people of Ansonia and Derby. So if she was running again, I would say it's going to be pretty much a slam dunk for her. However, we have two candidates who have not held statewide office. Yaman or Jaman? How do you pronounce it? Yaman. Okay.
Made that mistake several times.
Yeah. So Yaman ran before, and he has the Board of Aldermen thing going for him. Cara comes from this wave of people now who have been, kind of lifted up through the groundswell of post 2016, despite the fact that she's been, activist for much longer than that. And so we'll see where it plays out. I think it will be a good competition of ideas. Of course, I am supporting Cara wholeheartedly. I think she has the right mentality for the job. I think she has the right mix of experience and outside perspective. I think she has the kind of tenacity that will shake things up. She has good principles. She has many, almost all of her ideas, we're in agreement with. And, she has taken the time to really, despite, she's always been a Valley girl, but she's taken the time to really get to know the people of Ansonia and Derby. She has the support of both town committees, which is a big deal, especially in Derby, where it's, as we've spoken about, it was contentious.
Fractured. And she played a part in that.
And she has done a great job of putting that town committee back together. A lot of that has been on her, and she's done a great job of earning the respect of some people that may not have known her 2 years ago. And obviously what she's done with the Naugatuck Valley Young Democrats, right now I'm here speaking for the organization, but she's the one who pulled it together. She's the one who got all these outside people into a room together and pushed us forward as one unit and made us have an impact. Whatever you think the impact may be, we had a real impact in the last year. So I think she would be a great representative. So that's my plug. That's my take on the race. I don't know how it's going to go. I think I would give Democrats a slight advantage because it's been a Democratic seat for a long time and it's been pretty big majorities, but there's no way to know for sure.
And I guess, David, from the Republican perspective, what do you see happening in the 104th district? And specifically, I guess, like the narrative sort of nationally has been a reaction against Trump and Republicans. But on the other hand, in 2016, locally, it was, a Republican. We had George Logan upset, longtime Democratic state senator. Pretty much Linda Gentile was the only local Democrat that stemmed the tide of that. Are the Republicans really prioritizing this as an opportunity to gain a seat in the state house?
Oh, absolutely. I think Connecticut's situation is a lot different from what you look at nationally, because Connecticut, we have been under the control of Democrats in both the governorship, the state legislature, and they haven't offered results, and they haven't really delivered for the taxpayers and for the people. And so what we're looking at in the 104th district is, okay, who is going to be the candidate that is actually going to bring the same success that we've had in Ansonia under Mayor Cassetti? Who is that same type of candidate that will deliver in Hartford and try to help the state? Who is the only candidate in this race that will work to lower taxes, reduce the size of government, improve our infrastructure, and just fight for the taxpayers? And we think that Joe Yauman is the only candidate in this race that is proven to do that, as he's been a member of the Board of Aldermen, and that can do that if he's elected this November to Hartford.
Do you think that it'll be a gain for the Republicans, I guess?
We're confident that it's going to be a gain, but we're not going to get complacent. You know, we have to make sure that we're going door to door knocking. We got to make sure we're getting our lit drops out there, and we got to ensure that the people know what each candidate stands for and what they will do if elected up to Hartford.
And go ahead. Sorry.
Just from what I've sort of read and heard, I mean, the strength of these two candidates, their strengths are obvious. They're both intelligent. They both have a lot of energy, and they both really want to serve. Then I think the weaknesses would be that Mr. Yauman isn't as well known because he's relatively new to the Naugatuck Valley. And then the knock you hear against Cara Rochelle is activist, too left wing, is what some of the Republican critics say. So where does Linda Gentile play into this? Is she going to be, I mean, obviously she was universally respected. I was shocked when she announced her retirement. Our Facebook page can be partisan, but
really?
I've never seen that.
Got a throwback to 2017's election.
Yeah.
But the commenters, I should clarify that.
Yeah.
Me, I'm apolitical. I believe anybody for 5 minutes. But can she be a linchpin here, Linda Gentile? Does she have to get out there? Because if you look at I think the Republicans clearly have the momentum in Ansonia and Derby. It's hard to. It seems like that's what it is. There's this wave of Republicans locally. So Stephan, how do you?
Yeah, that's a fair characterization. They have all of the chief executives in Ansonia, Derby, Seymour, and Shelton. They have pretty much all the other congressional seats. The factor of Linda Gentile, I think, can be a strong one. Linda does support Cara. I think and I hope that she will be out loudly and proudly speaking for Cara. I would anticipate that would be the case. How much that will matter, it depends on what factors are driving people to the polls. I think it will definitely make a difference. Where it'll make the biggest difference is with the more moderate Democrats, perhaps, and the people who have known Linda a long time, but maybe won't get excited about a race without Linda in it. If Linda will make personal appeals to those people, I think it'll help Cara tremendously, and I think Linda plans on doing that.
And then David, I mean, you spoke highly of the Alderman Yauman, but in terms of ground game, a little bit. Let's pretend the microphones are off. Mm-hmm. It's just me and you talking here over some coffee. What does Yauman have to do to win that seat? He ran once for it and was unsuccessful. That was against Linda Gentile. So what does he have to do to get those votes?
Really, all it is he just has to hammer the issues, and that he's the candidate for lowering taxes, reducing the size of government, fighting for education and infrastructure. And I think the difference between this election and the 2016 election when he ran against Gentile is getting the issues out there again and showing that he's proven himself as an alderman. And that this race is entirely different. I think another factor that plays into it is the fact that this is a governor's election this year. And the Republican wave that is kind of surging throughout Connecticut, just the fact that Democrats have not delivered for the taxpayers in terms of ridiculously raising taxes over and over again. I think there's a new tax proposal out right now to create a state-based property tax, which is completely ludicrous, as well as the toll proposals. Like, people are just sick of having more money ripped out of their pockets, and so that this is going to come down to who is going to be the person that will fight for the taxpayers.
Will you guys be making an endorsement in the governor's race among your parties? And do you have any...
among the young Democrats, young GOP, you mean?
Yeah. And do you personally have any preferred candidate?
Mm-hmm. So we actually discussed this the other night at our Valley Young Republicans meeting. We're going to be abstaining from making an endorsement at this time just because this race is so contested. I mean, how many candidates do we have on just the Republicans alone? It's like
17.
17, 18. With Aaron Stewart now, it's like 18. I'm actually working for Mark Loretti's bid for governor. I think that he is the only candidate in this race that has delivered in his capacity as Mayor of Shelton, and he is the only candidate that can really deliver for the state of Connecticut. He is bipartisanly recognized as a problem solver, someone who will deliver, and his results in Shelton kind of just go, they speak wavelengths as to what he could do as governor. I mean, Shelton has one of the lowest tax rates in the entire state. Their government is operating smartly and efficiently, and again, the same thing. He can do the same thing for the state of Connecticut.
And past navel gazing guest, Mark Loretti.
I'm
sure one of the banner.
I didn't think he returns our calls.
One of the re-elections, we got him.
Did he know? Did he know he was a guest?
He's a busy man. He's a very busy man. I look at his schedule.
I'm just kidding. He returns our call. We don't. We do as much as we can.
Depending on what we're calling about.
I look at his schedule sometimes. I'm like, when do you sleep?
We had people should go back and look for an article, search valleyindy.org, where Jody, Mosger, now Gill, spent like 2 or 3 days with Mayor Loretti. He was speeding on the highway in a rainstorm without using his windshield wipers, which was one of the details that sticks with me.
He went to some meeting of some statewide grand poobahs somewhere, and they were all in a room talking, and somebody noticed Jody and was like, "Wait, who is this?" And he just said, "She's with me," and then everything. Nobody asked any other questions.
And then like a month later, he kind of seemed to Jody to have no memory of spending any time.
As you do, I guess.
But anyway, and then you're going to ask
Stephan about the Democratic field? It's not quietly as packed as the GOP.
Yeah,
but
we have what most people consider to be 7 serious candidates. There's a few others who just the reason they're not serious with air quotes is they just haven't been able to raise the kind of funds necessary to qualify for Citizens Election Program. The Naugatuck Valley Young Democrats will very likely be endorsing a candidate. When that happens is still being worked out. There's arguments for and against doing it before the convention, and then there's arguments for and against doing it during the primary once the field has narrowed down a bit, because I think on both sides we are almost certain to have a primary. The Republicans, I don't think, can whittle down 17 or 18 candidates to one. And the Democrats, I think at least 3 or 4 of the candidates will get 15% of the delegates to qualify automatically for a primary. And I think there's several Republicans in the race who are planning on just skipping the convention altogether and just petitioning onto the primary. So there's still going to be a role to play for endorsements after the conventions, which are in mid-May. But I would think we will come out with an endorsement at some point during the process. Me personally, I support Jonathan Harris, a Democrat running for governor. He has, I think, the most broad and important set of experience in the field. He was a former mayor of West Hartford, former state senator, former commissioner at the state level. He has really pragmatic views, a really great ability to connect people. He has creative solutions to some problems, which I think is something that has been missing a lot. He understands that it's not a my way or the highway type thing. And more than anything, when I think about politics, my focus is very hyper-local, to borrow your guys' phrase.
We don't have it copyrighted. It's okay.
That's okay, but that's what I think when I think of you guys. I care about Seymour first and foremost. I care about the Valley next. And of all the candidates that I've met, and I've met a lot of candidates on both sides, to be frank, Jonathan Harris is the one who speaks to the issues affecting the Valley the most, more so than anyone I've met. So that's why he has earned my support.
Did you have something?
No, we're just about roughly at the 49-minute mark. So we did, Stephan, I believe, said before we began that we would not get to anything we wanted to talk about. But I just state for the record, we've at least discussed maybe 30% of it. I don't know.
I guess very quickly, I mentioned briefly before George Logan won. He's the state senator from the 17th district. and I should have looked up specifically what towns. Ansonia and Derby.
It's like Ansonia, Seymour, Derby, Beacon
Hamden,
Falls,
Woodbridge,
part of Naugatuck, Woodbridge, Hamden.
It's a big district.
Ridiculous.
But
It's a ridiculous district.
Yeah.
he beat out a longtime state senator Joseph Crisco to win that first term in the 2016 election. He won it by 833 votes. So I would think that the Democrats, the state Democrats, would be sort of prioritizing that as maybe one to win back. Stephan, do you know who's running on the Democratic side to challenge Logan? And
Sure. Right now, I know of 3 candidates. It's not my district, so I certainly will not be making any kind of pick in this race. And I know not as much about these candidates as I should, but I can tell you who they are. George Cabrera, who is a union organizer, he seems to have a lot of support right now. Sean Grace, who is a member of the Hamden DTC and does a lot of work with some progressive groups. And then Valerie Horsley, who is a scientist at Yale, who has had some political activism experience as well. So those are the 3 right now that I know of. I know that the Naugatuck Valley Young Democrats, along with the Greater New Haven Young Democrats, will be sponsoring a debate between those 3 candidates.
Oh, no kidding.
And
Okay.
we will certainly let you
Yeah,
guys
let
know.
us know.
It's going to be,
Definitely,
almost certainly it's going to be in Woodbridge, and it's going to be in,
Oh, that's too bad.
yeah, way outside of your guys' range.
Yeah.
You'd have to drive all one
Do they
town
have a
over.
Stop and Shop there? Because I only no.
They
probably
do.
not.
Yeah,
Oh,
they
okay,
do,
Yeah, so maybe I'll
actually.
make it.
Off of the merit.
Ah.
But yeah, so that'll be an opportunity to hear from the 3 candidates together. I don't know if it'll be a debate or a forum, but it'll be a great opportunity for them to speak
Have a
their
debate.
mind.
Those are more fun.
I love debates, man. People don't want to do them anymore, though.
I don't know. I had an experience in Derby that I don't want to replicate again. I'll be
That's
honest
true.
with you.
But
It was tough.
To speak
yeah,
to
it's a
that,
lot easier to have one just in the office
Without the
Yeah.
AC
Yeah.
and bad audio. That's
Yeah.
what makes a good debate.
Yeah.
but I do
On a
think
cell phone.
I do think whoever comes out of the Democratic side on that is going to put up a very competitive fight. I think that is a true toss-up, district right now. Democrats held it for a long time. With all respect to Senator Crisco, I think, despite being a great public servant for a long time, he should not have ran in 2016. I think it was a bit past his time, and I think perhaps we would have seen a different result had somebody else stepped up at that time.
And you're saying that he didn't have much of a campaign, essentially. He really didn't campaign. that much,
He
is it?
expected to win, and I don't think I'm talking out of school when I say that he fully expected to win, and he just didn't have the kind of drive anymore to get out there and knock the doors that were necessary to take the district. So I think that to your point, the state Democratic Party will be targeting that race. I'm sure the state Republican Party will be targeting that race because it should be a pretty contentious one, I would think.
And then from the other side of it, David, obviously Logan's from Ansonia. What are some of the achievements that he can point to secure re-election?
I think this year, I've said it before, 2018 for Connecticut is going to be a Republican swing just because the issues are going to matter. And I know that Senator Logan has, attempted and is going to continue trying to fight for the taxpayers and fight for the 17th district communities. With a legislature swing, hopefully we'll be able to get more bills out there and be able to actually deliver. Not saying what he has done so far hasn't, but we need to get an advantage on the Democrats and really have this takeover of the Connecticut House and the governorship. That way we can actually deliver. And when the results do deliver, people will see more and more that Republicans are for you and not against you, I think.
And then so we're at 53 minutes. Maybe if we take 2 minutes, I just wanted to ask about school regionalization.
Right.
And I wanted to speculate on a hypothesis here. I know reporters aren't supposed to give opinions in any way. And I'm actually not giving an opinion as to whether I believe in school regionalization or not. But reading between the lines and some of the articles that come out, particularly like the Connecticut Post, some of the articles they've had about Shelton
and
wanting to do
a function of this is like I have reporting that I just haven't written out yet.
Well,
but
and then also just what you hear from some of the people involved on the
Yeah.
street, maybe not in formal interviews. It sounds to me, and I was going to throw this out here, and you guys don't have to answer, but I know there's, like Mayor Zekin and Republicans in Derby want to do this study to see if they can save money by combining in some way with Ansonia. Now that's sort of grown spider legs, and Seymour is maybe not a formal discussion, but they're talking, and now Shelton has been thrown into the mix. And Ansonia, clearly Mayor Cassetti wants to do this study. And we're talking a 2-year study, and Alderman Yalman was one of the key forces.
Sort of spearheaded it.
He's brought this to the forefront to a great deal. And the end result would be a recommendation, and then both cities would get to vote on it. But my belief is that the school districts don't necessarily want to do this. They might say, they might give us sort of generic quotes saying, yeah, we'll participate, but I don't think they want to necessarily regionalize. And you'll see some of them. It's my belief that some of the school boards and the school districts are sort of doing their own thing, where they're talking to each other in a way that prevents a complete study and then a vote, where they can regionalize other little aspects of their services, shared services. Right. I think there's regionalization, and what the school districts really want is, no, we want to stay as is, but we want to share services wherever possible. I'm just wondering if my hypothesis here has any basis in reality, if anybody wants to jump in there. Do you think, I mean, and you guys were both raised here and went to the public schools here.
I actually didn't. I stepped out of Ansonia public school system after 3rd grade.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I'm still kind of fluent in everything that's going on here. So, I mean, if
you're from Ansonia, though, right?
I am from Ansonia, yeah. So that's all that matters, really. What I would say about the regionalization system, or the study, actually.
Where'd you go to school? But now I'm fascinated, though.
Yeah, so I went to King Robinson out in New Haven for 4th and 5th grade, and then from 6th through 12th, I went to Engineering and Science University Magnet School in New Haven as well.
Did you take a bus there, or did your parents have to drive you?
No, I actually took a bus. First student provided busing.
That has nothing to do with anything. Because my kid goes to a magnet school, and I got to drive him every day. It's like,
do you really?
Oh, it's so. But anyway, that's neither.
They provide buses.
Go ahead.
So yeah, what I would say about this regionalization study is that, as many municipalities as we can get on board with it. Shelton, Seymour, we're happy to have them come on board, and we'll see what the study actually produces.
But do you think the schools really want to do it, though, David? That's
I can't answer that because I'm not on the school board.
But all right. But you're.
What I would say is we all have to be on the same page. The school boards, the government, we all have to be on the same page, and we all have to ensure that we're delivering the best possible solution for the students. And maybe regionalization isn't the way. We'll see what happens with this study. But I think another misconception about it is it's not just about saving money. It's about ensuring a better quality education for the students. And that, at the end of the day, is the most important. So if regionalization ends up occurring, and in the long run, we'll see what happens with how our education and quality will be affected, or if it'll end up costing more money to regionalize. That's something that we can't really answer until the study is actually done. And I think once that is actually done, we can all come to the table and say, okay, let's assess this. Let's all get on the same page, pretty much. And I think it speaks volumes that as well, Linda Gentile, the current state representative, is saying that regionalization is something that we need to explore. And so maybe as a Democrat, her poll, we'll see what can be done there. But 2 years, in 2 years' time, maybe we'll be sitting down at the same table again, and I'll be saying, hey, look, it worked out.
And then up in Seymour, I went to a school board meeting a couple of months ago where there was some apprehension, I guess, in one of the many Seymour type community Facebook page, which I can't even find on Facebook. I don't even, but that's apparently where the news is in Seymour.
I'll send you a link.
Yeah, and there was concern that Seymour was going to do something with Ansonia. Like there was sort of a little.
I could do a full podcast on my thoughts on regionalization. I will say that I think David and I will agree almost wholeheartedly on this topic. However, I don't think you're going to see it happen. I think the dream scenario would be Ansonia and Derby sharing one school district. I think down the road that would probably be the smartest thing. I think, frankly, Ansonia and Derby should probably be one town. They're just not really big enough to be two distinct towns. But once you've split people up like that, they never want to go back. And you'll see that in a town like Shelton. A town like Shelton would never, the people of Shelton would never be for taking on Ansonia or Derby because they would perceive them as having more problems, not bringing as much to the table, despite it perhaps being in the best interest of everybody. It just wouldn't happen. So what I think will come from this study, and I'm not intimately aware of exactly what's going on because I'm not in one of those towns.
And this hasn't come to the Board of Selectmen. It's not like a thing where the Board of Selectmen is signing off on this, which is another distinct difference between what's happening in these towns.
We would have some role in it at some point, even if it was just informational. However, what I think will end up coming from the study that's going on in Ansonia and Derby, and I'm sure Seymour will try to get in on some things that make sense. It's just going to be, in my opinion, people will try to leverage economies of scale where it's possible. So they will go in on, buying more equipment that they can split between the
more
districts.
The shared services.
Yeah, things that get cheaper as you buy more, and maybe it'll make sense. Perhaps there's a need for 3.5 administrators in Derby and 4.5 administrators in Ansonia, just for an example. Maybe one would be shared in some capacity, or I know in Seymour we're looking at trying to do even sharing services between the town and the education side in Seymour is like pulling teeth, because the people on the Board of Education, by and large, and I like a lot of the people on the Board of Education, they get hunkered down and like, this is what we're here for. We're here to protect the children. That's all we care about. And the people on the town side are like, well, listen, it makes more sense from a financial standpoint and from just a expediency standpoint if we're all on the same page and we're all working together. And Seymour's done a good job of moving towards that. So we're actually looking at, I know in Kurt's budget, he proposed an HR position that would be shared between the schools.
I'm still looking for a copy of that budget, Kurt, by the way.
Well, call him up. We'll call him right now if you want.
Twice.
Yeah, so he's looking at a shared positions just between the town side and the education side, and even that sometimes you hit roadblocks just there.
Like
so
in Derby, they wanted for the longest time to do one business manager for
right.
both the city and the school district, and that's never happened.
It would be great, but people always think when they're in their own little tribe that they don't want to. When people think their tribe does things well and does things the right way, they don't want it to be
why change it
interrupted by somebody else that they don't think is as good.
That's anything for that matter.
It's anything.
If you see change,
absolutely anything.
Yeah, it's got to be mutually beneficial, I would say. And if it is, then I think people will come to the table and realize, it may be better to go ahead with this.
And just for our listeners' benefit, I don't know if anyone's listening at this point, but I think in some of the reporting on this, there is a difference between what Derby and Ansonia is talking about. The Derby Board of Aldermen voted to do a formal study, as did the Ansonia Board of Aldermen. That will result in a 2-year study. They're forming a committee. They're getting help from the state education department, and a study that could take up to 2 years. And that could result in a referendum in both towns. Both towns would have to approve it to do some type of regionalization or merging. Yeah. Then on the lesser level, one that doesn't have as much teeth is being talked about elsewhere with this concept of shared services. That could be something that's just done between the local Board of Educations with a memorandum of agreement or something like that. It's not quite, doesn't have the same impact potentially as what the Derby Board of Aldermen and the Ansonia Board of Aldermen is talking about. I just want people to realize the difference.
In Shelton, the school board, according to the meeting minutes, voted to sort of dip their toe in and say, okay, we'll take part in this study if you could get the grant. But the aldermen haven't voted on it in Shelton.
And that's the key.
And I asked the Board of Education chairman and the mayor last week about it, and they both said that they in no way think that they'll, combine a school district with anyone. So
look at that. We're bursting at the seams with news.
Basically like, we'll see what you could bring to the table, but we don't think this will result in anything concrete in Shelton.
All right, so I guess that is it, unless there are areas, and specifically, David, since this is your first time on the podcast, and your organization, I could see Young Valley GOP. What's the name again?
Valley Young Republicans.
Those
we
guys.
abbreviate it Valley Young GOP too, so that may be your confusion there.
Is there any? No, I'm just an idiot. Oh. Is there anything you wanted to say about the group before we call it a day here? And thank you for coming on.
Thank you for the opportunity. Our next meeting, it's not going to be so much of a formal meeting. It's more of a social outing. It's going to be April 16th. We're going to be having it at Safari Cafe in Ansonia, and look for more details in the time ahead. We're going to be having other events too, so stay tuned to our Facebook page. That's Valley Young Republicans.
East Main Street Safari Cafe.
East Main Street. Best coffee in the Valley.
They went away and came back. Mm-hmm. Mostly
because they changed locations. Yep.
Yeah.
I haven't. They were gone. I haven't been drinking as much coffee recently. I feel bad, but
no, because you're Mr. Health Kick.
I cut coffee for like a year. And
just like afternoon, I've cut back. So
I can't stop myself now. Like when Duncan said that they're doing like $2 happy hour coffees, I'm probably gonna go later.
I got my extra large right here. All right, and then Stephan.
Sure. If I actually can just pay David and his group a compliment, I'm actually excited in a way to see them
I
getting
apologize for the phone ringing in the
okay.
background. That's Ethan's fault.
That's okay. I can keep my train of thought, no problem. I'm excited to see them getting up and running from the perspective of I like to see young people get involved in politics. I think one of my key achievements so far as a DTC chair is the kind of turnover that we've achieved with young people coming on board. So I'm excited to see the Republicans kind of doing the same thing. I look forward to maybe being an adversary of some of these people for a long time to come, which will be fun. And also they do a great job with social media. There's a lot to like about what you guys have done with your social media campaigns. So
all different memes.
Yeah. No, you guys have really embraced the times, and we're definitely going to be, stepping up our game in relation with that. So I wish you guys good luck, and keep going.
Are we going to start getting into like meme wars like Wendy's and McDonald's does on Twitter?
I'll talk to my communications team. And
Nice.
We'll draw up a plan.
Well, please tag us in those so we can manipulate your page views.
Nice.
So, all right. So I'm Eugene Driscoll on behalf of Ethan Fry of valleyindy.org. Follow us on Twitter at valleyindy and on Facebook where we're like 14 or 15,000 strong. Valley Independent Sentinel. I want to thank Stephan and David for coming on the show, and we should definitely do this again.
Sure. Absolutely.
Anytime.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
For hundreds of years we've brought you the news. Printed the info, we gave you the clues. Owners' profits were always sky high. Changing market now threatens our lives. Post-literation, critical reading, dumbed down nation, signs of inbreeding, TV sucking ideas from our head, public discourse just about dead. We'll ride the dinosaur, yeah, ride the dinosaur. Our readers are in the